Today in the EU, Germany's role in the uncertain future of the Schengen area. The treaty that established the European Union's border-free travel zone is nearly 40 and under strain, as some European countries increasingly defy its rules by implementing internal border checks. Where have these controls been implemented so far, and what does the future of the Schengen area look like? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. I'm joined in the studio by Niko Kurmayer, energy and environment reporter. Niko, you've been putting together a series on the Schengen area. How did that come about?
As you may be able to tell, Schengen is not directly related to energy and environment, but I'm also somewhat of a Schengen enthusiast. As many European citizens, I've come to appreciate the fact that I don't get checked at borders within Europe, while when I travel abroad, it's a frequent experience.
Right.
Yet, traveling within Europe, I think many of us have come to realize that what used to be frictionless travel within the EU, and particularly the Schengen area, so that's mostly Central Europe, has become frequently interrupted by police asking for passports, traffic jams caused by passport controls, single-lane traffic along the highway. And so I think what we're experiencing, or what has inspired me to once again engage with Schengen, is the constant erosion of the free travel area in Europe.
And let's get to the stories that you've been reporting on. A few countries have launched the alarm recently. Which ones and what about exactly?
If we look at border checks across Europe today, we see that they span all the way from the Baltic to the Adriatic Sea. If we have charted this on a map, and it looks eerily similar to the Iron Curtain. This means that Eastern, newer EU members, for whom Schengen was always a part of the promise of the EU.
Right.
Unlike Germany or France, who joined the EU at a time where Schengen was not a core part of the bloc, countries like Poland, Czechia, Bulgaria, Romania joined the EU knowing that they would have access, or expecting that they would have access to border-free travel in Europe. This promise is being broken. It has been broken by Austria, who vetoed the Schengen accession of Romania and Bulgaria. It is being broken by Germany, which is systematically controlling travelers from Poland or Czechia.
And Germany has a leading role in shaping the way forward of the free travel area. How so?
Germany is key to the Schengen area in many ways. For one, it's one of the core founding members. You have to consider in 1985, Germany, France, and the Benelux countries founded the first Schengen agreement while on a boat on the River Mosel. Germany has since upheld the torch of free travel, even when France, the second founding member, started reintroducing border controls as early as 2011. But Germany has in recent years come to contribute to the erosion of Schengen. First, Bavaria started introducing systematic checks at its border with Austria in 2015, citing migrationary and security interests. And ever since the Euros were held in Germany and they started doing border checks for security reasons, which, because of their novelty at the time, were extremely successful. Lots of people caught, lots of people turned away. Border checks have become a new object of fascination in German politics. This has not only become an ambition of the right-wing parties, but is also now being embraced by the central-left SPD, which belongs to the European family of the Socialists and Democrats.
Yes, indeed, we see how, especially after the allegedly Islamist attack in Germany, putting a halt to migration has taken an even larger place in political debate. 3 regions in eastern Germany are heading to the polls this weekend, with the far-right AfD leading in the latest predictions. What impact could a win of the far-right have on the implementation of internal border checks?
For one, the mere existence of the AfD drives the debate on migration and what to do about it. The Conservative Party is wary of being outflanked on the right on the issue of migration and has sought to reassure voters that it is strict on migration and sensible on migration, I would say. And secondarily, much like Bavaria, which is traditionally already to the right of Germany's CDU, implemented border controls in 2015 largely on its own. This could once again spark a country like Saxony, which borders Czechia, or Thuringia, which borders Poland. They could, should the national level decide to abandon border controls, decide to do it by themselves. So it would be the sub-national level of Germany deciding to implement border checks at the border with its European neighbors.
And as you've said, Germany is only now jumping on a trend that other countries have already started, like France. Well, why has it stirred so much debate, the fact that Germany has implemented these internal border checks? And why is the Schengen area so important?
Schengen is the tool by which the EU enables its people's right to freedom of movement. And it also includes the freedom of movement of goods, meaning that any border check introduces friction into the European single market, meaning transport costs increase, travel times increase. The more border checks there are, the more expensive goods will be. This is the immediate impact of border checks.
But there's also a symbolic side to it, right? When we think of the European Union, many of us as European citizens think of free movement. That's the immediate benefit that we have from being part of the EU, right?
Some say that the EU has managed to increase the legitimacy towards citizens by tying itself to the success of Schengen. Much like the euro, which can be attributed to the success of the EU, the removal of border checks similarly can be seen as a symbol of strength for the EU. In turn, this means that as border checks get improved, they negatively impact the perceived legitimacy or the success of the European project.
And we know that these border controls are tied to an increasing concern for immigration, but is there any proof that we see an increasing amount, for instance, of criminals crossing borders from Poland and Czechia? Is this evidence-based, according to your reporting?
Schengen experts and the European Commission will tell you that the science does not suggest that an increase in border check has an effect on crime rates, migration, and the like. But what the border is the theater stage upon which national countries can demonstrate their sovereignty. They're doing a play showing to their citizens that they have things in control, who in turn then feel reassured. In that sense, it comes very cheaply because the presence of well-armed police forces at the border is a relatively cheap way to show to your citizens that you have things under control.
At the same time, the Schengen Borders Code allows for the temporary closure of borders in emergency situations, and countries have cited out of the ordinary events in order to implement these closures. What are some of these examples?
The most recent has been the large-scale implementation of border checks during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then almost every EU country closed down its borders, started checking everybody. That is now over. But traditionally, France has always cited terrorism concerns. This has only gotten worse since the Bataclan attacks and the attacks on Charlie Hebdo. Other countries have cited security concerns, or large-scale sporting events are a very valid short-term reason for border checks. And those are actively encouraged by the EU, by the European Commission, by other member states. What is problematic is long-term border checks conducted over years and years, non-stop, justified by various reasons. So one year they will be justified by fears of domestic terrorism. The other year they will be justified by an increase in migration numbers, but they remain there all the same. Those are the ones that are actively eroding Schengen.
And for some politicians, the upcoming 40th anniversary of the Schengen area is the ideal moment for a political declaration on the matter. But seeing the current shaky status of the agreement, how likely is it to happen?
The Schengen Declaration as it is today is currently not happening. It will definitely be celebrated. It's just a question of how it will be celebrated and who will attend and what promises will be made there. But the Schengen Declaration essentially was a 2-page document that the Belgian presidency of the European Council presented to all 27 member states, asking them to commit to making Schengen future-proof, to upholding Schengen, and not just in name, but also the spirit of Schengen. several member states couldn't agree on it, so it had to be taken off the agenda last minute at a meeting of ministers in June.
I think what's interesting in this debate is seeing also the position of the EU Commission and EU institutions and the way they're trying to appease member states, right? Because in a way, there is a sense that the Schengen area is not something that can be enforced legally. So how is the EU Commission trying to win, in some ways, the support of member states and convince them to quit, internal domestic executive decisions on the matter?
The European Commission seems to know very well that it was EU countries that created Schengen, and it is EU countries who decide on the future of Schengen. So what the Commission has been doing is taking a very soft hands approach, which rests on the foundational principle that trust leaves on horseback and comes back on foot. Meaning that they feel as if they have a very limited amount of leeway with EU countries, because border control is such a highly contentious issue of sovereignty that they are being very soft in coordinating with EU countries. They're suggesting to them maybe consider more data-driven controls, maybe have better IT systems, anything but border controls. At the same time, they have not taken a single infringement procedure against a given EU country, despite the fact that the ECJ in one case even ruled that an Austrian border control was de facto illegal, yet Austria just continued on. It was the European Commission's choice, and it's a choice that it can make, to let matters rest in that sense. At the most formal level, the European Commission, Brussels, never took action. But I understand that at the informal level, Brussels has been hard at work coaxing EU countries to consider measures other than border controls.
So an alternative has been pushed.
There is no alternative as such to border controls, because border controls are the ultimate measure of controlling the border. But the Commission has always suggested, hey, maybe we should do a bit of justice cooperation, a bit of data exchange. As of this year, there will be a new IT system at the border, the so-called European Entry-Exit System, which will more accurately keep track of where people are in the EU and where they leave it. So these are supposed to help alleviate some of the causes EU countries perceive as to why they want border controls.
Thank you, Niko. I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This episode was produced by Miriam Sanz de Tejada and I. See you tomorrow. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.